Hey everybody, this is Eric Eckert with Eckert & Sons Trading. Here again to talk some memorabilia. This is my son Evan.
Hello.
You often see his hands as he's breaking various baseball cards, and we have fun with that. It's just a great time to be a father with the sons and talking baseball and talking memorabilia. So tonight I want to talk about the 1992 Cardinals season. Not so much about the Cardinals season, more about the Cardinal history. In 1992, the Cardinals celebrated their centennial. It was a fantastic year, and I think 1992 kicked off this awesome decade-long celebration of Cardinal history. 1992 was the 100-year mark, but they were able to celebrate just in 1992 alone their 100th anniversary. They were able to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the 1982 World Series champions, and they were able to look all the way back to the 1940s, so that would have been the 50-year celebration of the 1942 Cardinals World Series when they beat the Yankees in the 1942 World Series. So in the 1990s, the Cardinals had all of these Hall of Famers still living, all these Cardinal greats still. They were in their 70s, so you had Musial and Terry Moore and Enos Slaughter and Johnny Mize. I think he was about 80 at that time, so he came back for this big Centennial celebration that was put on by a guy named Marty Hendon, and I'll share a little bit more about him in another video. But the Centennial year, 1992, was very special, and I have some things that I collected from that year. And that year was interesting. And actually, in the end of 1991, my mother, Shirley Robinson, she was hired in the accounting department for the St. Louis Cardinals. And in 1992, we were my mom was an employee there, so we had season tickets. So we were on the front row of all this Cardinals history, and it was so much fun. And I collected probably way too much stuff from that time, and I've got closets full of stuff. But I just want to share a few things with you. For a few simple things. First thing is this pin. It has the 100-year celebration logo that they used, and that was pretty exciting. But they also had a whole collection of pins. A pin at that time for every one of the World Series that the Cardinals had won at that time. And I think by 1992, they had won 9, I think, because they won their 10th in 2006 and their 11th in 2011 against those Rangers. So these pins are kind of a cool keepsake. I don't know if anybody else can remember where they were on Easter Sunday in 1992. I definitely remember where I was. I was at Ozzie Smith's restaurant on Easter Sunday in 1992. Because Ozzie and Denise Smith, he was married to Denise Smith at the time, they held a 100th year anniversary opening season party at Ozzie's restaurant in St. Louis on Easter Sunday, April 19th at 7 o'clock. And I'll tell you, it was so fascinating to be there. That was the very first time I saw karaoke. I never knew what karaoke was. And Pedro Guerrero, who was the Cardinals' first baseman at that time, he got up and sang La Bamba. Rex Hudler, who I absolutely loved, Hurricane Hudler, he sang an Elvis tune. Ozzie and Denise did some Motown. I remember meeting Andres Galarraga. He had an injured wrist. I also met Stan Musial that night and read Schoendienst, and it was fun. It was a private party for Cardinals and administrators from Busch Stadium, from the Cardinals organization. I was able to go because my stepfather was a firefighter, and so he was working that night. So my mom took me, and it was just a wonderful time. So I remember where I was on Easter Sunday, 1992. Also, here is a program. I couldn't find my ticket. I know I have this beautiful ticket to the Centennial celebration that they had at Busch Stadium, but on June 11th, 1992, they had the Centennial celebration, and here's the program from that. The MC that night, the Master of Ceremonies, was none other than Jack Buck, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him probably in another episode, but I do have some other things with Jack in it as well. The 1992 limited edition yearbook. I've got one back here as well, but this one was interesting because I used to carry this around with me and seek autographs after the game. And I stay after the game, and I meet with this certain group of people, this family, the Murrays, and we would hang out and meet different ball players and such. I did mention Marty Hendon earlier. This is Marty. He was the VP of marketing for the Cardinals, and I'll share more about him in another episode. But Marty was kind of the master of marketing, and he's the one who did the Centennial celebration and brought all these Hall of Famers back. I think the man knew everybody there was to know. But just a few interesting things about the Cardinals in 1992. I don't know if you all remember who the Cardinals manager was at that time. It was none other than Joe Torre. Joe is mostly known for his time with the Yankees, Hall of Fame career there, but he was also a MVP shortstop with MVP third baseman with the Cardinals in the 70s, and then he came back to manage the Cardinals. He didn't have much success with the Cardinals. I don't think he got a lot of support that he needed from the administrators. It was the Anheuser-Busch who still owned the Cardinals at the time. But Joe Torre, Hall of Fame manager of the Yankees, was our manager at that time. And I wanted to share just something kind of funny or interesting. In the back of this book, I have it signed, can you see it, Evan, by Jack Buck. Jack Buck here, who was a Hall of Fame broadcaster, National Baseball Hall of Fame broadcaster, but with the Cardinals. And then Mike Shannon, who's still calling games today. We love him. Cardinals fans love him. I don't know if he could make it anywhere else, but we love him. But at the bottom, do you see who's down here in the corner? That is not the greatest picture. See what I did? Joe Buck. So whatever your feelings are of Joe Buck, this is not, I don't think, his greatest photo. But that's how I remember Joe Buck. When he first came on the scene, he was in the broadcast booth with his dad, and that's what he was doing. One of my prized possessions from 1992 is this book, this 100th anniversary book, special edition by a guy named Bob Bragg, who is a Hall of Fame sports writer with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And I got this for Christmas from my mother, and it was autographed by a number of people. As you can see, here's Jack Buck, here's Joe Torre, here's Steve Carlton. Steve Carlton right here. He's a Hall of Famer. Dal Maxwell, who was the general manager at the time. He was a Cardinal shortstop. Not the greatest shortstop, not the greatest player, but he was a pretty good general manager, I guess, with the Cardinals. And some other folks. But two of them that I want to point out to you are Bob Bragg, who wrote the book, which is kind of fun. And he wrote, "To Eric, hope you enjoy reading about the Redbirds as much as I did writing about them. Very best, Bob Bragg." But then there was another guy, a very noteworthy sports writer, who was, man, he was old when he wrote this. This guy named Bob Burns. And I think he worked for the Globe Democrat. So I'm a journalism guy. I got a degree in journalism, and I love, news and broadcast and baseball and all that stuff. So I have Jack Buck, Bob Bragg, and Bob Burns all in one book. So I'm just as giddy about Bob Burns and Bob Bragg as I am Joe Torre on this. But I also had this book signed by other people. Here is Enos Slaughter, and I'll talk more about Slaughter in another episode, but he signed this picture of him when his mad dash in the 1946 World Series when they went on to beat the Boston Red Sox, and a little hitter named Ted Williams, who was held to 5 singles in that series, and I believe that might have been his only World Series that he was in, unfortunately for Ted Williams. But then I also have this other, I think this is a great photo of Mike Shannon signed down here. Can you see that, Ev?
Yeah.
I just love that photo of him. That kind of speaks to who Mike Shannon is. So anyway, 1992 was a magical year for the St. Louis Cardinals. Marty Hendon brought all these guys back from the 30s, 40s, 60s when the Cardinals were really amazing. In the 60s, you had Lou Brock and Bob Gibson and this little-known catcher named Bob Uecker, went on to fame as a TV star and movie star, and he's the broadcaster for the Brewers. But he was there. All these greats were there, and it was a fascinating kickoff to a really awesome decade where we were able to celebrate the Cardinals again of 1942, 1944, 1946, and then the 1960s, 64, 67, 68. All those, we were able to celebrate these great anniversaries in the 1990s, and all these players were still around. Now a lot of them are sadly have passed on, but we were able to see them up front and personal back in those days. So 1992, great season, and I just thought it'd be fun to share some of those things. So thank you. Check out Eckert & Sons on YouTube. Also check out our eBay store at Eckert & Sons. And like this video and subscribe. Thank you very much.
Bye.